The red figure vase sits behind glass in the British Museum, painted around 480 BCE. It shows what curators call a courtship scene. An older man extends his hand toward a youth. The boy stands motionless, arms at his sides. Museum guides move past quickly, mentioning mentorship and cultural complexity. But the vase depicts something darker, practice ancient Greeks themselves recognized as deeply contradictory. This is the story of pederasty in classical Greece, not as mythology or distant abstraction, but as a documented social institution that shaped philosophy, military culture, and the lives of countless young people. It's a history written in philosophical texts, painted on pottery, and debated even in antiquity. Understanding it requires confronting uncomfortable truths about civilizations we've been taught to admire. If you're interested in the complex realities of ancient history, the parts often glossed over in textbooks, subscribe for more documented historical analysis. Ancient Greek pederasty, literally love of boys, refers to institutionalized relationships between adult men and adolescent males, typically between ages 12 and 17. These weren't hidden scandals but public, often celebrated relationships woven into the fabric of elite Greek society. The practice varied significantly across regions and time periods, but certain patterns emerged from the historical record. The relationship had formal roles. The erasts, the older man, was expected to pursue, educate, and desire. The eromenos, the younger partner, was expected to accept attention but not reciprocate desire, a crucial distinction that reveals the practice's inherent contradictions. Scholars like Kenneth Dover and David Halperin have documented how pederasty functioned as a form of social education among Greek elites. The erasts provided mentorship in politics, philosophy, and social graces. The relationship marked the younger partner's transition towards citizenship. Families often took pride in their sons attracting attention from prominent men. But ancient sources reveal profound tensions within this system. Greek culture viewed penetration as fundamentally shameful, an act that diminished one's social status and future citizenship rights. This created an impossible situation for young males in these relationships. They were expected to submit to something their culture defined as degrading, while maintaining the fiction that they remained honorable. Thebes provides a striking example. The sacred band, formed around 378 BCE, consisted of 150 pairs of male lovers who became ancient Greece's most formidable fighting force. Modern retellings often frame this as evidence of honored homosexual relationships, but Plutarch's account describes how these pairs formed. Older warriors selected younger males from prominent families in public, ritualized ceremonies. The youth's refusal would shame his family and damage his future. Plato's Symposium stands at the center of Western philosophy's engagement with this practice. The dialogue presents pederastic desire as a pathway to philosophical enlightenment, beginning with attraction to a beautiful youth, ascending through stages until reaching contemplation of beauty itself. This framework has influenced Western thought for over 2 millennia. Yet Plato's argument essentially transforms desire for adolescence into philosophy's highest aspiration. The youth's experience is agency. His perspective, his potential suffering receives no consideration. He exists as a stepping stone in the older man's spiritual journey. Not all ancient voices approved. The playwright Aristophanes savaged pederasty in multiple comedies. His jokes landed because Athenian audiences recognized the gap between lofty philosophical rhetoric and the reality of older men pursuing youths at gymnasiums. That these critiques existed and that they resonated with popular audiences tells us the practice was controversial even in its own time. Cretan culture took formalization furthest. A ritual called harpagia, the abduction, was legally sanctioned. An adult male would notify a youth's family of his intentions, then stage a ritualized kidnapping with friends' assistance. The pair would spend 2 months in isolation before returning to the city, where the youth would publicly declare whether he'd been treated properly, though scholars debate what genuine choice existed in this context. The practice had clear class dimensions. Wealthy families could frame these relationships as educational mentorship. Poor families had no such luxury. Their sons who entered sexual relationships with adult men for money became porno prostitutes and forfeited rights to future citizenship. The same acts, different framing, entirely different social consequences. The archaeological record speaks through absence as much as presence. Hundreds of vases depict these courtship scenes, always similar compositions, always the same power dynamic. Art historian Erika Block's research on these images identified consistent patterns in how the youths are portrayed. Smaller in scale, rigid posture, blank expressions, what she termed psychological immobilization. The historical sources provide fragmentary glimpses of individual experiences. Alcibiades, one of Socrates' students, described being pursued intensely by the philosopher Phaedrus. Another youth mentioned in Plato's dialogues vanishes from the historical record after his youth. No mentions of political career, marriage, or civic life. We cannot know what happened to him, but the silence is suggestive. The practice's psychological dimensions troubled even ancient observers. Aristotle noted that in relationships between unequals, including age disparities, genuine filial friendship based on mutual goodwill was impossible. The fundamental inequality prevented authentic reciprocity. Regional variations reveal how different Greek societies navigated these tensions. According to Xenophon, Sparta practiced a chaste version focused on spiritual mentorship rather than physical relationships. Plutarch, writing centuries later, describes Spartan pederasty as openly sexual and integral to military training. Scholars debate which account is accurate. Possibly both reflect different periods or idealized versus actual practice. What remains consistent, in Sparta, as elsewhere, boys were removed from families at age 7 for communal military upbringing under adult male supervision. Whatever the precise nature of these relationships, 7-year-old children didn't choose this system. The practice's effects rippled across generations. Many youths who experienced these relationships later became erasti themselves, perpetuating the cycle. This pattern suggests not just social custom but possible mechanisms of trauma and coping, attempting to reclaim power by assuming the dominant role. The historical record shows the practice declining during the Hellenistic period, facing increased criticism and falling from favor among elites. Roman culture, while engaging in its own forms of sexual exploitation of slaves and subordinates, viewed Greek-style pederasty with contempt. By the early Christian period, pederasty faced religious condemnation alongside broader shifts in sexual morality. Modern scholarship has struggled to discuss this practice appropriately. Early 20th century classicists often romanticized it or minimized its problematic elements. The emergence of gay rights movements created new complications. Some scholars worried that honestly examining pederasty as coercive elements might fuel anti-LGBTQ prejudice, but contemporary historians like Craig Williams and James Davidson have worked to separate ancient practices from modern sexual identities, analyzing pederasty within its specific cultural context without either sanitizing or sensationalizing. This history matters for several reasons. First, it demonstrates that civilizations we celebrate for democracy and philosophy contained profound contradictions and systems of exploitation. The same society that gave us Socratic dialogue institutionalized practices we would recognize today as abusive. Second, it shows that, even in antiquity, these practices faced criticism and created victims. Though those voices rarely entered the historical record, the youths depicted on vases left no written accounts. The boys who didn't successfully navigate the system disappeared from history. Third, it reminds us that philosophical brilliance doesn't exempt societies from moral scrutiny. Plato's metaphysics and political theory remain influential, but his framework for pederasty was an elaborate justification for pursuing adolescence. We can study the philosophy while acknowledging this uncomfortable reality. The archaeological and textual evidence paints a picture of an institution that varied across time and place but consistently placed young people in situations where they possessed limited agency.